When would you consider revegetation in the system?
We should have 20% of a square foot covered with desirable vegetation. When I get below that threshold, then I say we're looking at revegetation, especially if that plant is pedestal and is not producing any tillers or anything. It's just basically sitting there. We know that it's not expanding at all, and if I don't see a cryptogamic crust or anything else like that, it's a very sick system in my mind. It's time to revegetate.
There is some controversy today regarding the use of native versus non-native species in rangeland restoration and rehabilitation. Native species are favored by a number of groups because they play an important ecological roles, such as supporting biodiversity by supplying heterogeneous stands. They are pre-adapted to sites, so may require less inputs, such as water and fertilizer. They are also preferred because their natural predators keep them in check and make them less likely to become invasive. Further, they frequently promote better soil development and less site alteration than non-native. Despite the risk associated with non-native species, they may be preferred because they are competitive with invasive species, such as cheatgrass and halogeton. Introduced species are also easier to establish and cheaper to put into place.
The thing that's interesting, the blue bunch wheatgrass is a poor recruiter.
Furthermore, they may be more productive or better suited to meeting a particular management goal.
Not all introduced plants are monsters.
They're just misunderstood.
We wanted to get some perspective from people who have actually worked with it.
I've got some very strong opinions of what should be done and what shouldn't be done.
We assume that native species will be desired for pristine habitat, though it may not be immediately feasible on a site. Other seeding options include using assisted succession to establish natives over time.
And that seems to be probably one of our best options at this point on the big disturbances.
Restore function using a combination of natives and non-natives as appropriate, or site stabilization using fast establishing species, which tend to be introduced. In some cases, non-seeding practices or no action may be appropriate, generally when limited funds are available. Because both native and non-native species are appropriate for different sites, we have developed a process to help land managers determine which to use on a given site, based on abiotic and biotic characteristics, goals, seed availability, and available funds.
So when we look at each of the components that go into this chart, we have the 5 that were mentioned. We have biophysical conditions, current site vegetation, seed and seedling availability, funding, and goals, with our options here in the middle. And the first thing you're going to look at is the conditions of the site. Your sites are going to range from a really good site that has deep soil, high precipitation, to a poor site that's going to be the opposite, with rocky soil, low precip, steep slope. From there, you're going to go down to is current site vegetation. These range from having 100% native vegetation to having almost no native vegetation in the site. Next, you're going to think about what seed and seedlings are available to you. This is going to go from having all desired native seeds available all the way down to having no seed available, whether it be native or non-native. From there, we're going to look at funding and goals. Funding is going to go from you having unlimited funds for you to choose what you want to do with, to a very low or no budget, not having any funding at all. So for our goals, we have restoring it to a pristine site, a functioning community, using it as a single use for grazing or recreation systems, or just stabilizing it. Now, when it comes to these five components, the first 3 on the top are things that you're not going to be able to change. They're just the way they are, and you're going to have to work with the site as it is. The 2 on the bottom are things that can be adjusted. Like if you get down to an option and you don't like it, you can look at either increasing your funding, using less funding if you don't really need it, or changing your goals. When we put this all together, we have 6 options to choose from. By going through each of these and narrowing down, you will have, sometimes you only have 1 option to choose from, maybe you might have 2 or 3 in the end. Our first one is a full composition restoration. This is if you want to bring the site back to a pristine, working site that is going to be able to go back to how it was.
It's very nice to want to go back to a pristine system, but if it's been so radically disturbed, you're going to have to do it in steps.
Our second option is assisted succession. This is when you're going to use non-natives to help bring natives into a site and get natives more established in order to bring it up to a full restoration standard.
And in assisted succession, there are things you can look at. We can put in short-term species, native species, or introduced materials as an ephemeral type step. What Val Anderson is proposing is that they go to like a crested wheatgrass system, trying to tie up the nitrogen, build a carbon cycle, and then taking that out and then going into a native plant community.
Our third option is to simply restore function. This is when you're going to use either natives or non-natives in order to get a site functioning and a community functioning. A full restoration is possible with a site that needs to be restored function-wise, but it is costly and our fourth option is to simply stabilize. This is when you're going to usually use fast-acting species, which are very often going to be non-native, in order to get a site stabilized and working. A full restoration at this point really isn't possible or realistic. The fifth option is a non-seeding practice. This is what you're going to do if you either don't have the funds available or there's no seed available to do anything to the site. But there are other options and other things that you can do to help the site along.
Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't.
This is the same thing for when you do nothing, or the option to do nothing. You either don't have the funds available or the seed available, and we have to have it as an option because it is possible. You are going to run into times where you can't do anything, or it's not possible to do anything to a site.
Let's face it, fire, whatever, you're going to have disturbance. Disturbance is the rule.
Range managers manage for disturbance. The trick is that disturbance varies from site to site. We must consider individual sites as well as individual plant characteristics before any reseeding can occur.
This will be funny.
Ready?
So.
Oh yeah, you take alfalfa, you just show it a gleam label and die.
And then our second one is assisted succession.
You put mouse on alfalfa, it's good night Irene.